Hi, my name is Viju Schutz. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and an EMDR practitioner, and I work in my private practice, Phoenix Rises Counseling. And I am here to give you as many resources about trauma and seeking healing for trauma as I possibly can. And what motivates me is that I think I'm acutely aware of the damage trauma or undetected or unhealed trauma can do to individuals and relationships and families. Because I am a German American citizen, I came to the US at age 24. So I was raised in Germany, and my parents were children during the bombings of World War II. And I wish my family would have had the resources and the knowledge that I have today. Didn't have that in the 70s. It's a long time ago, as I have to admit. And after. And so I wish for you to have the knowledge I so much wish they would have had, so that you know where your struggles are coming from and that you can find resources for healing. And please use the resources on my website that I posted. They're free. They're really just there to help you, and there are no strings attached. It doesn't make sense for me to collect email addresses because I can only practice in Washington right now. So today I want to talk about what to do about trauma. So you may have listened to the previous videos and maybe had a thought or two of, well, maybe I do have trauma. So what do I do now? And so today I want to explain the different trauma treatments that are available to you, so you know your options. And of course, I have to admit I'm terribly biased because I have tried a lot of things myself. Most of the time I try them out myself. I've also treated trauma in myself for the last 25 years on and off. And EMDR is my favorite, and I love what I see when I use it with clients. But I want to make sure that you know your options and that I explain them at least well enough so you know what's out there. So, in having terribly scratchy voice today, I don't know where that's coming from. Maybe the bad LA air. So, the American Psychological Association recommends several trauma treatments, and usually it starts in the cognitive behavioral therapy area in that corner, and then variations of cognitive behavioral therapy. And that has its place. So most likely if you go to just any therapist you find in the directory or through insurance, most likely they're going to do cognitive behavioral therapy. And if they identify trauma in you, or you tell them about traumatic experiences, you can also use my free trauma screen. They're likely to use cognitive behavioral therapy or maybe even trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And it has its place. If you've never been to therapy and you have absolutely no idea how your mind works, then cognitive behavioral therapy is, I think, a good first stepping stone. In CBT, you learn that your thoughts that you have about something cause feelings, and then your feelings influence your actions, your behaviors. And so you learn to become aware of your thoughts and how you evaluate something, and that you can also change perspective and look at something differently, and it will cause different feelings in you. And it's easier to change your behaviors intentionally and also in response to different feelings. It's really bad today. So the way I like to describe CBT is, let's talk about it and change our minds. And as an example, you can try it out, why it works. So if you think of something that's really, really annoying to you, like a really bad experience or something that you find infuriating, and you think of it, you picture it, you will notice that it's starting to feel upset, or there's some negativity going on inside of you. And it might come out in your actions towards this event. And now if you think of something really positive, for me, that would be the deep cherry dish dessert I ate yesterday for a Sunday night dinner. If I think of that, it causes happy feelings because it was delicious. So the thoughts cause feelings, and our feelings influence your actions and behaviors, or or what behaviors we choose. And so cognitive behavioral therapy is very good for learning these first steps. I hope to cover more of that in future videos. But for right now, it's just the basics. In trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, you might go through or talk about a traumatic event over and over and learn to pay attention to how you assess the situation, what you tell yourself about yourself and about people and life, so your belief system associated to the traumatic event. Let's say there was a car accident. Whatever you tell yourself about yourself, I'm stupid, I should have seen that coming, I'm incapable, whatever the story is, as you go through the story and turn it into a narrative and become aware of your thoughts, you change them, do that a few times, and you keep changing the narrative until the narrative goes from something that's self-victimizing of bad thing happened to me to okay, a bad thing happened to me and I'm still okay, I survived it, I'm a good person, I'm fine, I'm competent. So we can change the narrative. And in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, you might even draw pictures. You can include an element of play therapy or enactment, or there are many variations, but it's about changing the narrative and becoming aware of your thoughts and reframing them. Another trauma treatment recommended is cognitive processing therapy. This is also in the CBT corner. I have not tried it out myself. I just kind of know about it vaguely, but it's obviously cognitive processing. So it also has to do with becoming aware of beliefs and thoughts and reframing them, anchoring them, and practicing different behaviors. It's in that corner. And then there's another recommended trauma treatment by the American Psychological Association. That's prolonged exposure therapy. I find that idea terribly mean and terrifying. So I haven't done that myself, and I don't do that with clients because I would be uncomfortable doing that. But the idea of prolonged exposure therapy is that you expose yourself to a threat. So something you find threatening. Let's say your fear of heights, or spiders, or germs. Oh, germs is a good one. Let's say you're afraid of germs. So you might at first in therapy, you make a list of what's a little bit bad, a little bit worse, like really upsetting, like totally upsetting. And you start with the thing that's the least upsetting and expose yourself to it until you're over it, like you're comfortable. Okay, nothing bad happened. And then you go to the next experience and next experience until it's the very worst experience. And it makes me think of an example I heard, and I think it was a TV show. I don't really watch TV myself. So some kind of reality show, I think, where somebody was exposed to, was exposed to germs. So but somebody had a phobia of germs, and the person at the very end of treatment was required, I'd say, to lick a trash can. So again, that would have been like the top, right? The top of the list of horribleness, to lick the trash can, right? First, reading about germs, watching images of them, touching the trash can with a glove, like just with the finger, and licking it at the end. Again, it's something somebody told me about a TV show, and I think that's horrible. But at the same time, I also know how it has worked really well for fear of heights, to expose yourself to heights and sit with your anxiety, pay attention to it and let it pass your system, and teach yourself that it feels scary, but it actually isn't, and then become desensitized to the experience. So it can work, and it also has its place. I think that's really good with like fear of heights, fear of flying, spiders, snakes. I don't know what you do in therapy then if you have to hug a snake at the end. I don't know. But for phobias like that, I think that's a really good option. I don't know how that's used with severe and prolonged exposure therapy, like, for example, when it comes to rape. Honestly, I don't know. And a therapist who works with trauma has different modalities usually to work with. So I think it would be different, the exposure therapy, like harmless, more harmless, but exposing you to something so that you don't have that strong reaction afterwards, and you learn that you're safe, you survived it, and the threat is not present right now. So again, all these have their place and their value. And another trauma treatment that's recommended is narrative exposure therapy. And now you hear that it has to do with a narrative. So it's also cognitive, maybe behavioral therapy. And I haven't done this one myself. I'm not certified in it. I know about it. But it has to do with changing a narrative and integrating events into one's life story in an uplifting, empowering way, versus telling it in a victim stance of something bad happened to me and poor me, in a way that's disempowering to make it empowering. And this is used very often in groups and very often with refugees. So to integrate that experience into a life story of who am I, how did I get here, and forming it into a self-affirming, positive narrative. Sorry, these are dogs in the background, and I recorded this video already a few times, and I keep making noise, and I really want to film it today. Now, the last trauma treatment that the American Psychological Association recommends, which is my favorite, where I'm totally biased, is EMDR. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So we're using eye movements to desensitize you to an experience and to reprocess it, so to update it. Really what it means is running a brain update. This treatment was not empirically validated, so not scientifically proven when I was in graduate school. I graduated in 2014, and it was considered controversial and experimental. By now it's validated, and the Department of Defense in the US paid for it, and I have this theory of the Department of Defense finances something that's probably valuable. And in my understanding, it happened after the last Iraq war. Actually started with after Vietnam, but the research on EMDR happened after the last Iraq war, and was paid for by the Department of Defense. I think that says a lot. My clients, in their words, what they say about EMDR is, it's the shit. Someone else says it's the Rolls Royce of therapy, and someone else, or in reference to my German background, said it was the Mercedes-Benz of therapy. And I totally agree. I think it's the gold standard of trauma treatment. And good examples that you can Google or look up on YouTube is Sandra Bullock and Prince Harry. They talk about receiving EMDR treatments. And especially Sandra Bullock says some very meaningful things about it. So you could look for that and see what they have to say. But I want to explain what EMDR is. So I called it a brain update, and it really is. And the way you can imagine that, I'm going to use technology as an example. I'll probably do a poor job because I wonder if I have a learning disability if it comes to technology. I find it so hard. But so it's a brain update. So, and it's as if you have a program running on your computer and you can't close it. And it's always running in the background, or a file in the brain that's open and it's also running in the background. So maybe a program would be better. But either way, it's open, it's running in the background, and you can't close it. And it's titled, Very Bad Things Can Happen in Life. And that's open, that's running in the background of your brain all the time. So that's really stressful, and understandably so, I think, that could cause us a lot of symptoms along anxiety and depression and similar things, maybe even addiction to cover up the strong feelings. And with EMDR, we can update the file. We can pull it out of the amygdala, run an update, and then store it somewhere else in the brain, in the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus stores experiences as things that happened in the past, good things and bad things, but just things that happened in the past. So the amygdala is a file with very bad, dangerous things can happen to me in life. She updated, kind of change the title and save it in a different part of the brain and change the title. So this is what EMDR is doing. And you also get to close the file on the program. And so it's not running in the background, and you're actually free of the constant emotional activation and strong feelings or strange reactions you might have because you updated and closed the program and stored it somewhere else where it's just no longer in your way and it's no longer running in the background. So I find that super powerful. Another way you could look at it, I was really thinking about how to explain that, but another way you could look at it is that your operating system hasn't been updated since you were 5 years old. It still runs on outdated programming. So whatever was true for you as, let's say, a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old, that formed your operating system, your basic belief system about yourself and life, and hasn't been updated. And imagine what kind of mess that would create today if your operating system hadn't been updated since you were 5. I mean, unless you're 7 years old right now as you're listening, you understand what I mean. So what we do with EMDR, again, pulling from the amygdala, updating and storing a memory in the hypothalamus and giving it a different label, like saving it under a different title. And so in the past events file of the hypothalamus, a memory no longer causes strong emotions, and the memories also fade. and become less vivid. This is why you should not do EMDR if you have to be a witness on a trial or you're defending yourself in a trial, because the memory fades. At least that's what I've read, but that's also what I recommend to clients. The memory fades and you're not going to have the strong emotions anymore. So if you want to defend yourself in a trial and you're totally neutral emotionally, and it's harder to remember the traumatic memories that you might be defending in the trial, doing EMDR before wouldn't be a good idea. Also, really, that's how powerful it is. But that's what it does. And the reason it works, or why it works, is because EMDR is based on a concept that we call neuroplasticity. So we have only discovered that a few years ago, or the idea has become more mainstream only a few years ago, not that long ago. Hey, the dogs are so distracting. So the idea of neuroplasticity is relatively new, but we now understand that somebody had a stroke and is not able to talk or walk can build new neural connections in the brain. So the parts that have died, that aren't working anymore, the broken neural connections, the brain can regrow them, or grow neural pathways like in a different area of the brain, and a person can recover after a stroke and learn to walk and talk again. And this idea is what EMDR is based on, that during any time of our life, we can update our brain and we can build new neural pathways, new neural connections in the brain. We can always learn and grow. And it's the brain's natural healing process and recovery process to use EMDR and to form new neural pathways in the brain. Like from traumatic experience, I'm helpless, it's really, really scary, to digest the experience, store it somewhere else, but make new neural connections. That you don't go from trigger to upset, but you go from trigger to, well, it happened in the past, I get over it. And that's a different pathway in your brain. The brain does that naturally. And that's why what two theories about EMDR, why it works, what they're based on. So one theory of why EMDR works is the distraction theory. So that theory says that if you're focusing on traumatic events and thinking about them, but you're so distracted because you're doing eye movements or tapping or listening to bilateral sounds, the memory you're processing slips through the brain faster and gets reprocessed faster and is stored somewhere else. I am a total science nerd and I'm always curious, so I tried it out, and I tried it with a friend. If vacuuming would do the same thing, vacuum or cleaning litter boxes or washing bathroom floors, which is something I spend a lot of time on because I have 4 cats, on top of the 2 dogs that are making so much noise in the background. And so I tried that, thinking of a bad event, cleaning, vacuuming, distracting myself with other activities, and I did not get the same results as with the eye movements. So for me personally, it seems like, no, just distraction doesn't do the same thing. Tried it with my friend, we decided the same thing. So personally, I'm not convinced that just distraction is enough to process traumatic memories. And so another theory of why EMDR works, and I love that one, and I'm totally biased, but it's the REM sleep theory. So if you think about it, during REM sleep, know that the eyes move back and forth, so from left to right. I know it looks weird, but they move back and forth very quickly. And so that's when you're dreaming. And during the dream state, the brain is actually trying to cope with memories or impressions, or whatever happened to you during the day, to cope with them and digest them and figure out where to store them. And EMDR is consciously mimicking REM sleep. So we're inducing these eye movements, rolling back and forth, while exposing ourselves to traumatic memories and the beliefs and the feelings and the physical sensations all at the same time, but we do the eye movements. And this theory considers that possibly that EMDR possibly uses the brain's natural healing process to process a traumatic memory, because this is what it does anyway in our sleep all the time. We notice that especially if we had nightmares. So something might be stuck somewhere, and the brain was just too overwhelmed by stress hormones in the moment and can't process it. So, but it's the brain's natural healing mechanism. And I personally believe that if we use something that is already a natural bodily function or brain function, if we use the natural healing abilities of our systems, that, well, they're there for a reason. And that it's probably a good idea to use the natural healing pathways. So I find that theory more convincing. You can read about it on the internet, and there are different opinions. So, and when doing EMDR, so the traumatic incidents, they get stuck. Or, no, let me back up. Sorry, I'm really distracted by the dogs, but I think this is the 5th time I'm trying to record this video. So if something happens to you that's just too intense, too shocking in the moment, you might know that from a moment of shock. Like, you actually don't feel anything. You're really just focused on surviving, or you freeze because you don't know what to do, or you go into fight or flight mode. But the brain is so flooded with stress hormones that we can't think straight. That's actually true. And in that moment, a memory might get stuck, as it's just too much flooding of stress hormones. And so if it's stuck, then just in case it gets filed away in the amygdala, ooh, that was scary. I don't know what to do about that. So it's stored in the amygdala, in the alarm center of the brain. And with EMDR, we pull it up to update it. So that's why just dreaming, the natural process of the eye movement, might not be enough, because the memory is so charged and so overwhelming. It kind of overwhelms the brain capacity of working with it. But we mimic that natural process. And again, we do that with the eye movement and the bilateral stimulation, as I explained. And yeah, as we do EMDR, so we bring up a bad memory, we do the eye movements, we mimic REM sleep, and the brain makes associations, new associations, in nanoseconds. So from bad to healing. And our brains are made that way. They really have that built-in capacity, or that direction of go from bad to good, make it better, heal it. It will go from really, really bad to, I actually survived it. Actually, it's not so bad. Actually, I have a lot of skills. Actually, I even learned from that. Actually, I'm even better than before. So if you allow the brain's natural healing process to kick in, which it does in nanoseconds, that's why you'll feel better after one EMDR session usually, your experience goes from bad to healing and empowering and positive. And in that process, the bad memories become less vivid and fade. That's why don't do it before an important trial. And at the end, at the end of EMDR, you're left with a memory that's stored somewhere else, has a different file title of, just events of the past. Wasn't that great? But I can deal with it. And the thing that's really left over is the positive belief. So not only does it actually, when you do EMDR, Do you process through a negative event and let go of negative beliefs or narratives about yourself and life, but you also wire in a positive, empowering, strengthening belief about yourself and life. You wire that in, but neurologically, so that when difficulties arise in your life, your brain is just wired to go to the positive belief more quickly. So you actually turn the trauma, not only do you get over it, but you actually turn it into a growth experience that leaves you stronger and more whole, and leaves less space for your authentic expression to come out, and your zest for life and your creativity, which would be present if it didn't get disrupted by trauma. So I love EMDR. Quickly, I have to say, and I am going to make another video about that, but on this version, I have to say that don't do EMDR by yourself, ever. Please, promise. I know there's stuff on the internet to do it yourself. Don't do it. I'm going to explain in the next video why you really, really shouldn't. But please promise you won't do it. It's unsafe. And that's actually the downsides of EMDR treatment and why you must do it with a licensed practitioner. I'll explain that next time though. Just quickly, how to get EMDR. So you can call your insurance carrier and ask for an EMDR therapist and see if they have someone in their provider roster. Most likely they will. If they can provide you with one and you can prove trauma, you can request that the insurance, actually they have to pay out of network if they don't have a provider available, or their providers are so booked up that they can't see you in forever and ever. But first, if you have insurance, it makes sense to call your insurance and see if you can get an EMDR therapist. Also, an EMDR therapist will most likely conceptualize events in a sense of trauma. So look at it through a trauma-enforced lens, which is something I'm doing. There are many different perspectives to look at one thing. So many different truths, depending on where you're standing. I stand in the trauma camp. And so an EMDR practitioner most likely will conceptualize your traumatic incidents as trauma, even if it is not full-blown diagnosable post-traumatic stress disorder acute, because it can also be chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, so like a lifetime of traumatic experiences, and we all have our share. So, but call your insurance provider or search in directories. So if you go to Psychology Today, for example, or the many directories that are out there, I also use Mental Health Match, but there's so many more. If you look for a therapist who takes your insurance, add that as a filter that you're looking for an EMDR practitioner, so that you get that therapist. And then the last option of finding an EMDR practitioner, and I think, of course, in my maybe my arrogance as a mental health professional and valuing EMDR so terribly much. If you go to EMDR.org, you find certified EMDR certified EMDR therapists. So these are therapists who make it their career in their specialty, and they have more education than others and ongoing consultations. And they most likely have more in their toolbox. So EMDR.org, I'll put that underneath my video, but very often EMDR certified therapists, they might do only cash pay. And so if you can't afford that, then use your insurance, look for an EMDR therapist. An EMDR therapist, so like a clinician can use EMDR after a 1 weekend course And either, that's when we can start using it. I did 2. And then 10 or 20 consultations with a very experienced mentor. Then that the EMDR course is finished. But after a weekend of EMDR, we could use it as therapists. And some therapists are just so very good that they just integrate EMDR and they're great. I think a lot of criticism of EMDR comes from therapists that were not as trained and didn't have enough of a toolbox, and then the client experience was too rough, or they think it didn't work for them. So you can go to EMDR.org. That might be cash pay, that might not be affordable for you, and go to your insurance carrier and just look for just EMDR therapist. Or another option is also great if you find a therapist who is like maybe just an EMDR practitioner, so they're not EMDR certified yet, but they're working towards it. So again, in the process of learning, which then continues for the entirety of the career. It's like to be EMDR certified, we have to get a certain amount of continuing education and mentoring, and I find that very, very important. But again, if insurance is what you can afford, please go with that. And then I want to quickly mention, so if you want, the finest of the finest of the finest, because you know that you have some kind of trauma that doesn't make it possible for you to function, or really limits your experience, or their relationship problems, EMDR is a short-term treatment. And so for me as a therapist, like, this is really a problem because I have such a high turnover rate. So therapists who do, if we do let's talk about it and change our minds, well, that can take maybe 3 to 5 years or 2. So when they have their practice full, their clients stay with them. With me, they're always leaving. So somebody who is involved, really focused in EMDR, even with very severe traumas, I see that if they don't just want to spend a lot of time talking and connecting with the therapist, so 3 to 6 months, and very often in a very short time periods, the traumas are resolved. So I see people go from extreme panic attacks, the worst trauma, difficulty functioning in life, to, oh yeah, that was bad, but let's move on. No more panic attacks, no nothing, no symptoms. And so then I'm always running out of clients. I have this high turnover rate, but that's how great EMDR is. So if you do end up paying cash, take aside maybe a 3 to 6, maybe a 6 months period, and focus on rewiring your brain and healing in such a profound way. That can also be worth it if it's affordable. And I will post the options underneath my video. I apologize for the dogs. I just walked them. I think they're in a bad mood today. Please take care of yourself. I hope that was helpful, and know that you're important and you matter. And if you think you're affected by trauma, please get help so you can live a full, fulfilling, and fun life and express yourself fully in all the ways that you truly are. Take care.